The Sunday Times, plenty of news this morning about the CQC. Minister tried to gag NHS whistleblower is the front page story for them. The Telegraph as well, talking about the NHS and whistleblowers speaking out cost NHS whistleblower his job, says the Sunday Telegraph. The Mail as well going with that story. NHS chief offered bribe to hush up the death of my baby. That is the claim from a father who says he was offered a £3,000 cash deal. The Observer continuing the Guardian's run of stories about GCHQ and hacking. US accused of hacking China as Snowden's spy row grows. The Sunday People, who had those photographs last weekend of Nigella, divorce is their headline. I want out of this marriage. That's what they say her friends are saying. The Sunday Mirror, this is the teacher Jeremy Forrest, runaway teacher and pupil to marry, claims the Sunday Mirror. The Independent, more on CQC, baby deaths, NHS chief should quit. And The Sun, I want to wed jailed teacher. The Sunday Express finally, sick treated in storerooms. Well, to review the papers this morning, Helena Kennedy and Russell Brown. Good morning to both of you. Good morning. Helena, starting with you, what have you got?
Well, there are lots of stories in all of the papers about cabinet disputes over spending cuts, because there's going to be a new review and all the ministries are vying with each other to be cut less. And I've picked up a story which is in the front of the Observer, which is about a whole set of military leaders, former chiefs of staff, generals, who are saying, do not raid the aid budget to the developing world in order to fund the Ministry of Defence, because it's short-sighted and folly, because in fact conflicts come out of that impoverishment and in fact you make the world a more dangerous place. So it's very interesting that here are military men of great experience saying that this babble about don't cut the military is actually something that has to be looked at cautiously, and that we shouldn't be diminishing our aid.
And defence, of course, being one of the departments that seems to be going right down to the wire at the moment.
There's a strong Conservative position which is send less money to poor countries. You know, why should we care about what's happening elsewhere? But we should care about what's happening elsewhere. So it's an interesting...
So cutting aid to foreign countries may ultimately exacerbate military conflict, necessitating further funding of the Military of Defence. So it's a short-sighted solution.
In one.
Huh.
There you
Don't
go.
do that then. Don't do it.
Glad you're here to sum that up.
Russell on side. We've solved that, yes. But there are lots of stories, and in fact, there's a big story here in the Daily Telegraph about how that vying between ministries is taking place. And there's a
Osborne, he's coming on.
Osborne's going to come on, and one of the stories, Sophie will, I'm sure, put it to him, is that the family's sort of czar, Louise Casey, is wanting to maintain a large sum of money to work with problem families in our country. And part of the problem is that all the other ministries are saying they don't want that money to be spent in that way. They want the money to be retained within their different ministries, whether it's work and pensions, defence, justice, and so on. And she's making the argument for saying we've got to spend money on the poorest and most troubled families in Britain.
That's a good argument, actually, isn't it? Because otherwise there may be further rioting, and then we'll have to clear up the rioting. if you're not nice to poor people, eventually
it's going to be tough, though, isn't
agitated and
it? I mean,
riots.
you look at what's happening this week. It is going to be incredibly tough, isn't it? Some of these cuts that are going to be announced, £11.5 billion of cuts, and years more austerity to come.
George Osborne says we're out of intensive care. Everything's all right now. So that's all right then.
But what it's also bringing up, though, is the fact that there's a split in the cabinet because, of course, on many of these arguments, the Liberal Democrats take a different position from the Conservatives. And so it hones in on the divisions that there are there. And some of the stories are about the way in which, there are divisions inside the Treasury. I've got a story which is about legal aid, which is that they're trying to, of course, cut legal aid and to prevent people having lawyers of their own choice. And part of that is about, and Clegg has come out saying he doesn't want to see that. So, again, battles between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives around how money is taken out.
It's a farcical coalition, is it? Because it's full of disruption and it's disjointed and
most
full of
governments,
conflicts. They're not really coalescing at all.
Well, most governments are about, in some kinds of compromise. However, the divisions are becoming more clear. Yeah. And, of course, they will become clear up until the next election, because the Liberal Democrats want to say we fought our corner to make the cuts less austere.
Russell, you've got a story about tax havens.
I do, as a matter of fact, and it's quite pertinent given that there's all these talks of 11.5 billion of cuts, and Helena has pointed out areas where these cuts are likely to come from, the military not wanting cuts, and these legal aid cuts that you've just mentioned. It turns out that our country, Britain, of which we're all rightly proud, is a tax haven for dodgy shell companies. Britain is one of the, this is at the Times, which I think would be well into it. They're saying, look, Britain is one of the easiest places in the world to set up puppet shell companies that can be used for tax evasion and money laundering, according to an international study by Australian academics. Now, I don't know if we can trust these Australian academics, because part of it was they dressed up as people looking for tax havens, so it was already, there was skullduggery at the offset. But it does seem interesting that this country is a tax haven. Plus, like 50% of Tory funding comes from bankers, doesn't it? Someone told me that the other day. And of the 20 biggest donors to the Tory party, 14 of them have strong associations to offshore accounts. In fact, I heard that Dave Cameron is known as Offshore Dave in that community.
Well, I mean, the whole business about tax evasion is one of the issues of our time.
Absolutely, and
having
the spotlight very heavily falling on it.
It's all right. You're doing it slyly.
Yeah.
Helena, your next
I just
story.
avoided that tax. I didn't evade it.
I didn't evade it. I know.
Avoid.
Well, we're going to have to shine a greater spotlight on all of that. But the other
Can I just say quickly? My point is if this sort of thing's going on, we shouldn't be worrying about nicking money off poor people, the already impoverished. Look into this stuff and tax companies that are here.
Crack down on it, though. How difficult is it to crack down on it?
Well, I don't know because I'm not a government minister, but I imagine if Vodafone are getting a certain amount of money from British people, they should definitely pay a certain amount of tax and shouldn't be let off the hook.
Well, there's a story in the Daily Mail, I'm telling you, which is about naming and shaming everybody who's getting state benefits and to publish how much money they're getting from the state. And so they're going to do that. This is if we're going to go after tax dodgers.
Isn't it? The think tank suggesting that should be done.
Welfare. I've been on welfare. You're already a bit ashamed. You have to go down and sign on. That's horrible. Then the cheque comes. You feel a horrible feeling in your stomach. The housing benefit I was getting was illegal, so that was a bit shameful as well. Don't name and shame them people. Name and shame all these tax haven people. Name and shame the people that are funding the Tory party that have themselves got offshore accounts. Didn't George Osborne's family have offshore accounts?
Well, you can ask him later.
Can ask him, absolutely.
Oh no, it's a rhetorical question. You can talk about that when he comes on.
There's a whole set of stories across the press which are about the NHS, about whistleblowers basically being threatened if they were going to make public things that were going wrong, and about and that terrible story about a father of a child that had died. His account being that he was offered money to remain silent. But this story is on the front of the Sunday Telegraph, and it's about basically the way in which people lose their jobs if they speak out about things in the NHS. The only worry I have about this business is that it's all across everywhere, and there's no doubt there's too much secrecy around this. But there's also a way in which I can't help worrying that it's also about undermining the National Health Service to say that it has to be run in a totally different way, and perhaps private companies would be better. I'm not sure private companies are any more open and transparent. So I think that we really have to examine those.
Absolutely.
These whistleblower stories are like a prelude to saying let's privatise the NHS further. Is that what happens?
Well, I mean, it's one of the things that you have to worry about. But I certainly think that we do want to listen to stories about bad things that are going on in public.
Let's have a look at
services.
PRISM. That's a story that has been running in the GCHQ. If you can just hold the paper so we can see the story there.
This is good. This is that PRISM story about whistleblower Edward Snowden. He's been charged with espionage, or he's reportedly going to be charged with espionage. But what he's done double slyly is he's released that the Americans were spying on the Chinese. And he's in Hong Kong. Yeah. That was a brilliant move by Snowden. It's going to be really hard to get over there and nick him. Yeah,
because that is the story about the United States being accused of hacking China. It is on the front page of The Observer. It's picked up in all the other papers too. The extent to which this is absolutely global, and you can be sure that if the United States has been hacking into China's calls, that China's probably doing the same to other folk too. And I think that there is a general sense in the public, though, that why not, if this is going to keep the world a secure place, which is a very seductive
What do you reckon?
way.
Does it bother you?
I don't like it. I don't like that Edward Snowden reveals information that we're all being spied on, and then the person that gets in trouble is the person that reveals the information. What about the information?
Does it bother you the notion of being spied on? Does it bother you that they could have masses of emails, phone calls, even if they're not looking at them?
Of course, because initially they'll say, we're doing this to protect you from terrorism, we're the government, but then then any time they're annoyed about anything, they'll be snooping around. Any kind of insurgents, any kind of anti-authoritative stance will be met with further snooping. I don't trust the government. I don't want them looking at my emails. Some of them are very smutty.
I mean, well, I mean, I'm not sure that we all want to look at you.
You do.
No, I do.
I'll write you an email in a minute.
Right, let's just we're running out of time, so let's just have a quick look at the story which you picked out about protests, which is these extraordinary
Ed Balls
scenes.
has come out. That means we're doing well.
He's
literally in the shadows.
He's in the shadows. He's waiting to
He's
take
a
the
shadow person.
The story about Brazil and these pictures that have come out,
brilliant.
amazing, which spiralled from what it was about the price of public transport.
People were getting striped up on their bus fare. They've had enough of paying
And now
too much
look.
for bus fares, which is annoying. Because I remember when I used to have to get on buses, it is annoying that sometimes they won't even give you change or anything. The people of Brazil, from this municipal dispute, have risen up en masse and are confronting the authorities. You told me, Helena, that Brazil is meant to be one of the rising global economies where they're browned off and they're kicking off, and it's happening all over the world.
Go on, Helena.
People are rising up.
Well, it is true that Brazil was one of those countries that was seen as having survived the global crisis on the economy, but actually they are now facing recession to some extent themselves and a diminution on their growth. And it is meaning that the middle classes are suddenly, as well as the poor, are suddenly feeling the impact of that. So you've seen protests.
People are recognising these class divisions are superficial and irrelevant, because I suppose the privileged people that are exploiting us is becoming so exacerbated that everyone's becoming affected by it.
Well, that's the story in The Observer, is that this is not just confined to Brazil, it's actually global. It's happening in Turkey,
Our
happening in
country is
Cairo.
happening. Look at these shell companies we
I
mentioned
need to ask
earlier.
you one more question. Brazil, on your tour? Because
yes,
you're off.
promote.
There you go. Let's go.
I'm going on a tour. I'm here to promote
No,
it.
but you're not starting.
So even I'm a bit sneaky. Not even
You
trust
are
me.
very sneaky. You're not going to the Middle East anymore, are you?
I want to go to the
I know
Middle
you do.
East, but they said that they can't guarantee they won't kill me. And I said, I'll still come if you want. Like, because death is inevitable.
But they won't do it. Right, well, good
But I
luck
would
with
go,
it.
but I'm going loads of other places. Follow me on Twitter, @RustyRockets. That information comes directly from me.
Promotion to the end. Thank you very much,
Trust
both of
me.
you. You're very kind for coming in.
Thanks for having us on your
Pleasure.
news programme for the morning.
It was wonderful
You're much
to see
better
you.
looking than you
Oh,
in
here
real
we go,
life, Andrew.
Here we go.